Hey there, everyone. It's time for a live event. We are going to be working on uh, a little bit of snow today. Hopefully, I don't see any where I live for a while, but our project is called Snow is Glistening. These fun little mug mats so that we can make maybe some gifts for those quilters in our lives, or we want to send something in a Christmas card. These are really lightweight projects you can send easily in an envelope. So my name is Colleen Tauke, and I will be your instructor through this little tutorial of working on Snow is Glistening. The QR code is now popped up so that you can download your copy of the pattern. If you don't have time to do it now, remember you can always pop back and zip your phone across that QR code. It'll take you right to the link for the project. So let's see. We might have a problem with audio here. Maybe not. Maybe we're good. I've got a set of fabrics that I'm using as my backgrounds, and I decided to pick something. If you follow me at all, you know that I like to use checks and plaids and stripes in my project. And this time I thought I would focus a little bit on using checks or kind of plaid looking fabrics. As you'll see in all four of the mug mats that I made here, I used a small scale check plaid kind of look for that outer binding, because when you cut bias binding, because we're going to round the corners just for something different and maybe a place where you can experience doing bias binding if you've never done that before. It gives it a really fun little look to the outer edge. And bias binding, usually that's a four-letter word that kind of strikes fear in quilters' hearts. And by doing small pieces that we can kind of get over that intimidation factor and realize that it makes really nice curves in a small project before we maybe jump in to use it for wavy edges or scalloped edges on a large quilt or wall hanging. So it's always good to start small scale when you're learning a new technique. And if you've not done a lot of applique before, this is another good place to practice that stitching and the maneuver, kind of the machine skills that you need to work around the small shapes. I wouldn't say it's super easy, but it is a way to sharpen those skills of kind of machine management, I guess, and learn a little patience, because it does take a little time to get around those shapes. Barbara says, good morning, everyone watching and learning from Victoria, Canada. Yay. Love all the Christmas themed projects. And this is kind of Christmas theme, but you know what? It has longevity. It has legs. For me in the Midwest in the US, this will last until March. So I get a little bit more time to enjoy these, because we've had snow even into April. And I know there are places in the country that do get snow later. So when you're working on a project like this, you know you have a little bit more time to enjoy the project throughout the season. Esther says hello to everyone from the Netherlands. Sandy is popping in and saying good afternoon from Austria. We love having all our international quilters joining us. Let's see. We also have Christina saying good morning from Colorado. And I bet you many parts of Colorado have already seen a few flakes in the air and possibly building up on the ground. So when I went to work on these projects, my snowflake, wanting it to be white, I needed to find a fabric that was a little tighter weave, a little denser. Some of our white fabrics can be very sheer and see-through, and you'll notice that the white really stands clear and doesn't show. Even on the dark fabric, you don't see the navy through the fabric. So kind of go through, if you've got a stash of white fabrics, look for that more densely woven white, not that super sheer fine piece of white fabric. I happened to run across, and I don't remember when I purchased it, And all I know is that it was printed in Japan, so I'm not sure the maker of this fabric. It technically has a little bit of glisten to it, and I don't know if the camera is not going to quite pick it up, but it has just a little bit of a silvery kind of shimmer to it. It's not overly glittery, I would say. When you get it down to a small piece, it just has a little bit of glimmer to it, so it kind of gives you that snowy effect. So that's what I used as my snowflake fabric. So I'm going to set that aside. Then I went through my stash of fabrics. Literally, I think I bought one piece out of this. So I found kind of a solid red that has little X's on it. And then I found this piece in my stash, and it has almost looks like polka dot, but it's squares. And I figure, well, that's kind of a check, kind of a plaid. That will work. And you can see that I cut my angles off of this and linked my pieces together because that's the biggest scrap I had left. So then navy blue, and I found a navy blue check to go with it. They don't have to be perfect matches in color. Close does count in this case because we're just making mug mats. This happened to be a green that I had in my stash that has a little bit of gold and red in it, and it actually has a gold metallic. I don't remember what I used this for, but I did go looking because I didn't have a green check or a plaid, but I found this window pane, which I thought it's in the same family, though it's lighter. And that works as a check or a plaid. So I can cut that as my binding. And today we're going to be working on one. I love aqua. I love blue. So this is going to be my background. It's got a little tiny bit of a dot to it. I don't know if the camera really picks it up too much, but it looks a little like snowflakes. And I found a check that will work for that. So we'll cut our bias binding off of that. So stay in the smaller scale. I guess I didn't have my example of my light blue. The light blue background actually has a little bit of silver swirl, almost like snow to it. So keep them in a little smaller scale. Possibly look for a check or a plaid. You could use a stripe also. It'll just look like kind of like a candy cane effect on the edge if you cut bias binding for that. If you don't like bias binding, just leave it square and bind as normal. So we've got the whole fabric selection covered. Let's see. Next we're going to be tracing our snowflake. So in the instructions, I have the sizes of everything cut. I'm talking about what kind of fusible you can use. You can use heat and bond. You can use steam-a-seam, whatever product you can get your hands on, whatever fusible, but it has to be a sewable fusible, unless, of course, I guess you don't want to sew at all. But make sure if you want to do the stitching over the edge of the snowflake that it's a sewable version. So heat and bond light works great for that, or a steam-a-seam. Now the difference in the product, let me see if I can find a piece here. Steam-a-seam has that glistening glue side, or no, heat and bond, I'm sorry. Heat and bond has the gluey side here and paper on the other side. So it has paper on one side. The steam-a-seam brand has paper on both sides of a glue layer. So I've already traced this one, and you trace it on one of the paper sides, and then you're going to peel the back off and leave the tacky gluey side in place there, so it's behind your traced shape, and then you can position it because it has a tackiness to it. Some people like one product over another. Sometimes it's what's available. So depending on what's available in your area. Peggy says good morning from, just says good morning. Kelly says good morning from Arizona. We have good morning from Costa Rica. I'm not sure who that was, but you know who you are. We are so glad you're joining us. Angela says hello from, I'm going to kill the city name, so I'm going to say Brazil because I know how to pronounce that. Angela, we are so glad that you're joining us from Brazil. And then we have good morning from Florence, Oregon. Wow, that's a ways away from here, close to the coast. And then we have Brooke saying hello from Houston. Tina, who's listening from New Jersey, I believe. So we've got East Coast, West Coast, we've got international, we've got all the way to the southern border and up into Canada. We have everybody joining us today. Okay, we're going to be cutting the 5.5-inch squares of our background pieces. So you would go ahead and cut those ahead, set that aside. We have to get the snowflake shape, which is in your pattern. On one of the pages there, you're going to have a template for that. You'll trace the number of snowflakes that you want to correspond to how many of the mug mats you want. Now, I like to use and traditionally, I in the past used to always tape my template or my outline to the window so I could only work during the day, and then I would trace onto my product the shape. But using an LED light board, which is fairly inexpensive, has made it so that I don't have to stand at the window. My fingers don't have to go numb trying to trace my shape, and I can do it at night. So it's just a really thin LED light board that you can purchase online. And I'm trying to think, did I have it? I did not list it in the supplies because it's not a have to. It's an option. Maybe you already have a light board, you're ready to go. If not, maybe this is something you could put on your Christmas wish list. That's actually how I got mine. My husband ordered it for me. So putting your shape over the light board, you can then trace your design onto the paper side. And if it's a product with paper on both sides, it doesn't really matter which side, but trace that design so that you have the number of snowflakes that you are looking to make. Maybe you want to make a set of 6. Maybe you want to make pairs as Christmas gifts. They'd be great stocking stuffers. If you're going to maybe doing a little Christmas exchange. I know there's a lot of quilters who will get together right before Christmas and have a little gift exchange thing, play a game. And this would be a fun thing to put in. You could tuck these inside of a Christmas mug along with some hot cocoa mix, and you are ready to go for a Christmas gift for an exchange. So trace out that shape. Don't forget to do the very center. There are shapes that are kind of like an apple seed shape, and that kind of lets the background fabric kind of shine out and through your snowflake to give it that lacy look. So make sure that you trace that also. And then you have your outline ready to go. Pretty easy to accomplish. And you can trace all of your snowflakes, have them ready to go. And then in the instructions, I always say to bubble cut the shape. And that just means to take your scissors, and some people prefer to use paper scissors over their good fabric scissors for this portion. So I just want to kind of chunk out the shape. I don't want to cut it exact yet because the exact cut comes when I'm transferring or cutting it out of my fabric. And that's when I'm going to make all those outer edges look so nice and good, cleaned up and perfect shaped. So we can put our template away, and depending on which of the products you're using, Steam-A-Seam or Heat and Bond, or maybe you have a preference for another, make sure you always read those instructions. You know, they come with these little instructions wrapped in the roll when you buy it or tucked in the package. Make sure you read it because the time and heat setting can be really important to success in getting this to adhere to the fabric. I have seen people that are like, well, why won't this adhere to my fabric? It seems like I've heated it and I've heated it again, and the edges are, you know, peeling up and they're not staying in place. Why is that happening? It's usually because possibly you've overheated it. The glue can actually be killed by overheating, and it can penetrate all the way into the fabric and then not want to adhere to your fabric. Because it's all sitting in one layer and you didn't leave enough glue for it to adhere to the second layer. So got my bubble cut snowflake. I'm going to peel off the back side. On this one, this happens to be Steam-A-Seam product. And I really don't have a preference one way or the other. It's just what's available. And now the tacky side is here. I'm going to put that on my fabric so that down on the back side of my fabric, so then I can heat it in place. I don't want to overheat it. I just want to get it, attached to my fabric. This piece I can do away with. Now we can take out our scissors. In fact, I am going to look for longer shears. These will work really great, the little pointy ones, when we do that inside cut, those apple seed shapes. But when we're cutting outer edges of this, we want a little longer sweep with our scissors. I never thought about it before, but I learned it from a very seasoned quilter that a longer blade actually gives me a nicer, cleaner cut. So my shape is on the back side of my fabric. The little glistening side is in the front. And I'm not a huge bling kind of person, but when it comes to snowflakes, why not? So I can do longer cuts with a longer blade. Another reason to have a really good pair of shears in your collection of tools, and maybe another idea for a Christmas gift wish list item. But you can cut around the outside, then just directing your fabric so that you get that smooth outer edge of your shape. And we're just going to cut just a little bit of it so that we can talk about getting it adhered to our fabric. Now let's see if I've got some people asking some questions. Diane, is that a Caterpillar light board? No, it's actually just a random LED tracing board. My husband, I told him I wanted a tracing board or a light table for Christmas one year, and that was a couple years ago. And yeah, he just literally typed in light board, and it is just a kind of a generic LED. I don't even think it has a brand on the bottom. Let me look. No, it says LED drawing tracing pad. It does not have a brand listed on it at all. So it was fairly inexpensive, but it works great. And since it's very small, it's so easy to store in my sewing cabinet upstairs so that I can always find it, that and the cord. Make sure you store them together so you don't put the cord somewhere else. But it has been a really, oops, I did not heat long enough on the edge. There's the reason why you need to make sure you follow your instructions and think about the timing when you're pressing that shape to the back of your fabric. We do want them mated up the whole time we're cutting so that we have easier. Oh, my iron turned off on me. The safety features on our equipment are great, but when they turn off and you're in the middle of a project, we have to wait for it to warm up. So Sherry says, hello from the Pacific Northwest. In Washington, there's snow on our two mountain ranges, the Cascades and the Olympics. Esther says, can you use HTV for the snowflakes? I'm not sure what HTV is. If that's vinyl, you could cut them out of vinyl and apply them. If that's what HTV is, I'm sorry, I don't know the acronym. I guess I need my daughter here to catch me up. Susie says, is the template available on an SVG format? And I believe that's for cutting out. It is not. It is just downloadable as a PDF with our pattern. I'm not sure how to change that over to another format for cutting another way. You all are probably way more knowledgeable. And some of those, some of our computers have snowflake designs out there so that you could alter the snowflake. It doesn't have to be my shape. It could be one that you find within your computer that you could use also. That way you could vary each of the snowflakes, which is exactly what a snowflake is. They are all each unique. So I hope that helps a little bit. Esther is heat transfer vinyl. I kind of had a feeling that that's what it was about. My daughter has one of those machines for cutting out vinyl, and that would be absolutely the fast and quick way to do this. I guess I'm old school and using the fabric version of this. If you have that heat transfer vinyl available, then I guess you could go that direction. There are so many ways that we can use the things in the quilt world to get us to a similar finished product. And if you have that capability and that skill, I say, see if you can make it work that way, because that is another possibility. For those of you who have embroidery machines, it could be embroidered in white thread instead of an applique. That's another possibility. So take the technology you have, play with it, and think about maybe this is just a jumping off point for and as an inspiration. So I know that those embroidery machines do wonderful designs also. I just don't happen to have one of those, and I don't need another addiction. So, okay, when it comes to cutting out those little seed spots in the middle of our snowflake, just do a quick little fold so you can snip into that area. This is where those nice, sharp, pointy scissors come into play, so that we can get in there and easily cut out those center shapes nice and clean, so that we have the access to that to do the stitching on that portion also. So I'm just going to cut one of them out here. And of course, holding on to it. There we go. They're so tiny. I know that it's kind of a pain to cut, but I think that that little centerpiece really does add something to the snowflake design. If you don't want to cut it out, leave it solid. Another option. Okay, so I've got, I'm going to cut just a couple so we can adhere this down and talk about how to stitch and layer all of that area. So once you get done, you'll have to make a decision of how it falls on your background fabric, because it's six-pointed, it's a six-sided shape, and you have a four-sided background. So let me just get that snipped out of there. And you just have to take tiny little cuts to get those going. And now it's time to layer it onto our background fabric. Make sure that you leave behind the gluey layer. Now I gotta get it to come loose for me. And then we can talk about what size stitch and what type of stitch to use off the edge. There we go. And it's just kind of gently removing the backing so that we leave the tacky part in place. Now, when I was doing the spacing, I was kind of using like a general distance top to bottom and then side to side. Remember that you have to put binding on it, so you want it centered. You can do a fold and of the background piece and find the center of that too. Close counts. It's a mug mat. This one has that tackiness, so it's going to hold in place so that I can move it over to the iron and then heat it in place. Now, in the instructions, I think I gave you, I have a Post-it note that I put on my sewing machine of the, yep, I did. Gave you the size of the zigzag that I used for stitching the outer portion of the snowflake. I thought about using a blanket stitch. It's a little harder to manipulate under the machine just because of the nature of the stitch. It likes to go more in straight lines, and the zigzag gave me the flexibility to go around curves tighter. So I found that that worked better, and I used a matching thread on that. So I used white thread. And then in the very, very center, I have to think about what I did. I did a straight stitch, because trying to do a zigzag on those teeny tiny pieces, I did a straight stitch like 1/8 of an inch from the edge, and I kind of played spirograph with myself. I loved those kind of diddly things when I was a kid. So I went out just outside of that curve, went around the second side, jumped over to the one next to it, and kind of did a loop-de-loop all the way around until I got back to the center. So a straight stitch just to hold that down. It's not going to take a lot of abrasion. It's a mug mat, so we don't really have to worry about too much. It just seemed like an easier way to adhere the center, make sure it was lodged well, and still finish the edge a little bit. Angela asks, I'm going to sew for the family of our daughter. Very good. And then we have a hello from Cincinnati. We are glad that you're joining us. Now, I did the stitching on these at this point so that I wouldn't be quilting it yet. So we're going to just do the stitching. And I have to set up my machine. So I've got a zigzag. I've got to get to, I'm in the quilt section. I get my zigzag set. Now, the was 2.25. And every machine may be different. Upstairs will let me go to 2.25, a smaller increment. This machine, 2 or 2.5. So I'm going to opt for the smaller of the two. And then for stitch length, 1.2, which is the default on this stitch. So I'm setting it as zigzag. I've got my width and my length set. Now, in order to do this on your machine, always practice first. Take a scrap of fabric, layer a second piece on top, and test out that zigzag to make sure it's something that you're comfortable with. Maybe on yours, you need it a little wider so it's easier for you to see. Maybe you have really great eyesight and a little bit smaller is okay. But just pick the width that you're comfortable with. You know, again, patterns are suggestions and are not hard and fast rules. So I'm going to go ahead and start where the applique meets the background fabric. I'm going to put my needle there so that I know, and then my needle is set so that it will take a bite into the applique right away. Kind of know where the needle on your machine wants to start. That's why I talked about getting comfortable with your machine and being able to manipulate it well. It's one of those kind of projects where we're not in a hurry. And literally, this is how I stitched mine upstairs in my studio when I was working on them, is just tiny stitches, a little at a time, listening to the radio, something to keep your mind busy, because I know these are kind of tedious to stitch, but they're so adorable when they're done that it makes it worth it. When you get to a spot where you have a right angle or some angle of some sort in this, make sure your needle's in the down position. It's kind of always best if it can be right along that edge where the applique meets the background fabric. Needle down, pull up your presser foot, and then you can use that as a pivot point to change directions so that your stitching always drops off the edge of the applique. That's the best way to secure that outer edge so that it can take a bit of abrasion. The stitching won't show on the background fabric. The idea of using a matching thread is really key here, so you won't see your stitching. And I'm doing mine with black, so you can see every stitch I'm taking. Okay. And literally using one hand to maneuver the fabric, one to lift the presser foot. Maybe you have a machine that will allow you to, as you stop, that will break up the presser foot. Great feature on a machine to have for something like this, so that you don't have to manually lift. But this is a little bit more simple sewing machine, and it doesn't have that capability. My one upstairs has a knee lift, and that allows me to lift the presser foot that way. Okay, I'm going to just stop there and let you see what I did with my little stitching so that you can see the zigzag stitch in black there as it drops off the edge of the applique and then back into the snowflake, so it secures that outer edge. Now, for that inside one, if I switch my stitching, my needle to the center so that I'm going to do just a couple of those little open spots so that you can tell how I did those. And this is just a straight stitch. I've seen this done on appliques before, and I thought, well, if other people can do it that way and they were in competitions, I'm going to try that out and see how I like it. It's done on wall hangings a lot. It's a very simple straight stitch. And by connecting them all, I could simply start in one place doing those interior shapes and stitch all of them continuously. So I didn't have to break thread. And this might not look the best in black, but in white, you would never see my little elbows in my shape. And then you would go on to the next one. Okay. I apologize for my black thread, but okay, now you can see what I'm talking about. I started at one, went around one side, curled up to the next, go down to the next, and just kind of do a loop-de-loop all the way around to get back to my starting point. And I think the camera can pick that up. There we go. Now you can see how I did that. And in white, you can't even see the thread at all. Okay, then at that point, once you have all of your items, all your snowflakes all stitched, it's time to pick a backing fabric. And sometimes I use just another scrap of a similar color. I just picked blue there. I picked another red. This is a great way to use up those fabrics. We have pieces left over from projects. Something that's close will go as a back, or you can use the same fabric as you did on the front and layer that up with one piece of batting. And then we're going to work on just a real quick approach on the binding. We have videos in our on our website on doing bias binding, and we've talked about bias binding quite a few different times. So in order to cut bias binding, let's go in real quick here before we run too long with this. And it tells you that you need about 22 inches of bias. And you may have to link pieces together. That's totally fine. I think I linked pieces together on every single one I made because I had small pieces left over. Like that red I showed you was just a narrow strip. So I was using leftover pieces, putting them together. And on this, I believe 2 1/4 inch. It's a little easier to cut bias binding narrow than wide because it's going to come around that edge. It doesn't need to be super heavy to finish off the outer edge of your project. Okay. Normally we're cutting straight a grain. We're just going from selvage to selvage. But that 45-degree line on your ruler, that is going to be your guide for one of the along the side edge of your fabric. And lining that up, you can then easily cut a 45-degree angle. And I'm going to show you how I linked pieces together because applying it pretty easy, straightforward. Like I said, we have videos that will show you the really intricate details of applying bias binding. But 2 1/4 across the fabric. Now I got to get all the way across. I need a longer ruler, but a larger space in order to do that. So we're just going to cut a 2 1/4 inch strip. And I need a new blade. Guess what? It might be time for me to remember to put a new blade into my rotary cutter. You know, that happens every once in a while that you have to actually put a new blade in so that you can get those nice clean cuts. Okay, 2 1/4 and all the way to the end of the fabric here. The only thing with a bias binding is to remember that it has more stretch. You just need to be a little bit more gentle with it so that you don't distort the binding before you get applied to your project. Now, yes, you should press this ahead so it's nice and flat. But in this case, I already have angles here which are going to be useful. But I can put this right sides together and join. If you want your little gingham or check to be kind of uninterrupted, but most of the time you can't really see the beginning and end anyway, but you can do a little trick where you fold back along one of the lines. I got to move everything out of the way here because I need to get to my iron quick. Fold back along one of the checks or the window pane gingham. Do a fold there. Trick is a glue stick. And apply just a tiny bit of glue along that fold. What we need, or we want, is to match them up if you want them to be matched. But remember, whenever you come all the way around at the end, you control over that space. And we can lay them on top of the other and have them fairly well matched. So there, you can get them to look perfect if you prefer. But once you get those in place, my glue stick did not hold. I didn't put enough on there. But you can then fold back and stitch right along the fold to join your pieces together. Now you have your bias binding constructed, but you have to fold it in half just like you do regular binding. Give it a nice press along the fold. And this is where you have to be a little more gentle. Try not to manhandle it because it is a stretchy bias edge. And then you'll have it ready to apply to your project. Now, our project is still square at this point. And the little trick here, the way I created mine, was to take my backing fabric, my batting, and stack them up. Then I decided I wanted to quilt it first. So I quilted basically matching thread, highlighting around the shape. That's all the quilting I did on that. And let's see. I did matching thread on the back. So this is the only one that has a little bit of a contrast thread. It didn't have a perfect match. And I think you can see the shape. There we go. So I just did a machine quilt around the edge. And then when you get everything machine quilted and ready to go, there is a template shape, a curve in the pattern. And basically it's the same curve as off of the multi-size curved corner cutter. I just gave you this curve you could use. You can cut one out of template plastic, or you can figure a way to transfer that, or you can use whatever. You could use a cup, you could use a plate, whatever curve you want on that outer edge, so that you can trim your quilted mug mat with the curved edge so that it's not super sharp curve, just a gentle curve. And that's how I went about doing that. You can just basically trace that template or cut it, lay it on top, and then trace it on each of the four corners. Then by trimming through the layers, you're going to have all the batting, the top, and the backing there. Then it'll be time to apply your binding. And I applied my binding to the front and rolled it to the back. I know it's traditional. I like to do hand finishing on that. Judy says hello from Indiana. And Kay says hello from the UK. We are glad that you got to join us for our little snow is glistening tutorial today. And once you get all of your corners trimmed, applying the binding, basically we're going to start along a straight edge and you're going to gently pull back. You're not going to tug because you want to leave some fullness. So when you get done stitching this on, it should have the stand-up ability to the outer edge. And that will roll beautifully to the back side. It's almost like magic when you get done stitching your binding on, because at first it looks like, how in the world is this bump going to create that curve? But as soon as you flip it to the back, it just finds a new memory. Sometimes I'll give it a little light mist and you'll get these perfect curves every time. So the snow is glistening, maybe brought to your house. Thanks for joining me today. We'll be back with at least one more tutorial, an event in December, so that we can finish up holiday time.